Am I the a-hole for refusing to care for my sick mother? I know how that sounds. Trust me, I've been called every name in the book by my family, friends, and even strangers on the internet. But before you judge me, let me tell you the whole story. Because sometimes, the most difficult decisions in life aren't about right or wrong, they're about survival. My name is David, I'm 34 years old, and I'm a cardiologist living in Denver, Colorado. 3 months ago, I received a phone call that would force me to confront the most painful chapter of my life. My mother had been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease. She's only 58. The family immediately assumed I would drop everything and move back to my hometown of Bakersfield, California, to become her primary caregiver. After all, I'm the doctor in the family, right? I have the medical knowledge, the stable income, and according to them, the moral obligation as her son. But here's what they don't understand, what they refuse to acknowledge. This woman made my childhood a living hell. And now, they expect me to sacrifice everything I've built to take care of someone who never took care of me. It was a Tuesday morning in March when my phone rang during my lunch break. I was reviewing patient files at Denver General Hospital, where I've been working as a cardiothoracic surgeon for the past 6 years. The caller ID showed my brother Marcus's name, which was unusual since we barely spoke more than twice a year. Marcus's voice was shaky when he told me I needed to sit down. I could hear our sister Rebecca crying in the background. My first thought was that something had happened to Dad. He'd been having heart problems for years. But it was worse than I imagined. Marcus struggled to get the words out. Mom had been having memory issues for months. They'd taken her to see Dr. Rodriguez, and after all the tests, the diagnosis was devastating: early onset Alzheimer's disease. The doctor estimated she might have 5 to 7 years before complete cognitive decline. The words hit me like a physical blow. Alzheimer's at 58 seemed impossible. Sure, Mom had been more forgetful lately during our rare phone conversations, but I'd attributed that to stress or normal aging. Not this. I found myself slipping into clinical mode, asking about the severity of her current condition. Marcus explained that she was still functional most of the time, but having episodes. The week before, she'd forgotten who Rebecca was for about an hour. The day of her appointment, she couldn't remember how to get home from the grocery store she'd been shopping at for 20 years. Then came the part I'd been dreading. Marcus started talking about care arrangements, mentioning that Rebecca and he couldn't handle it alone. As the doctor in the family, I understood these things better than they did. I had the means to help in ways they couldn't. I cut him off before he could finish asking. If he was suggesting what I thought he was suggesting, my answer was an immediate no. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. To understand why I reacted so strongly to Marcus's suggestion, you need to understand my childhood. Picture a modest 2-bedroom house in Bakersfield, California, where the summer heat was nothing compared to the coldness inside our home. My mother, Patricia, was what people politely called difficult. She had untreated depression and anxiety that manifested as emotional abuse toward her children. But not all her children equally. I was the middle child, caught between Marcus, who was 2 years older and seemingly could do no wrong, and Rebecca, who was 4 years younger and treated like precious porcelain. I was the mistake, the burden, the constant reminder of my father's moment of weakness, at least according to how she used to describe my existence. From the age of 6, I remember her constantly telling me I was too sensitive, too needy, and nothing like my brother. When I brought home straight A's, she'd find something to criticize. When I made the honor roll, she'd ask why I wasn't class president like Marcus had been. The worst part wasn't the constant criticism, it was the emotional withdrawal. She would give me the silent treatment for days over minor infractions. A spilled glass of milk could result in a week of being ignored, of watching her shower affection on my siblings while treating me like I was invisible. I remember being 8 years old, crying after falling off my bike and scraping my knee badly. Instead of comfort, she looked at me with disgust and told me to stop crying like a baby, adding that it was no wonder I didn't have any friends. That comment stuck with me because it was partially true. Making friends was hard when you're constantly walking on eggshells at home, when you never know what version of your mother you're going to encounter each day. What do you think about what I've shared so far? Was this kind of treatment enough to justify my current position, or should I look past childhood issues for the sake of family? Marcus was everything I wasn't in my mother's eyes. Athletic, charismatic, popular. He played varsity football, dated the homecoming queen, and had that effortless confidence that I envied desperately as a kid. I was the bookworm, the quiet one who preferred reading to sports. While Marcus brought home trophies, I brought home academic awards that seemed to mean nothing to our mother. Her favorite question became why I couldn't be more like my brother. It didn't matter that I was getting perfect grades, that I was already talking about becoming a doctor at age 10, or that teachers consistently praised my work ethic and intelligence. The breaking point came during my junior year of high school. I had been accepted into a prestigious summer program at UC San Francisco for aspiring medical students. It was a huge opportunity, something that could set me up for success in college and beyond. But the program cost $3,000, money our family technically had, but my mother deemed too much to spend on what she called my pipe dreams. Meanwhile, that same summer, she spent $4,000 on a new car for Marcus because he deserved reliable transportation for his senior year. I'll never forget that May evening in our kitchen when I laid out all the paperwork, a detailed plan for how I could work part-time to contribute to the cost, and letters of recommendation from 3 teachers. I begged her to consider the opportunity, explaining that Dr. Martinez had told me students from this program had a 90% acceptance rate into medical school. She barely looked up from her magazine, dismissing my plea by saying I always thought I was so much smarter than everyone else. Maybe it was time I learned that the world didn't owe me anything just because I got good grades. When I pointed out that she'd spent more money on Marcus's car, she finally looked at me. The coldness in her eyes is something I'll never forget. She told me that Marcus didn't disappoint her every day just by existing. I want to pause here to thank everyone who's still watching up to this point. I know this is heavy content, and I appreciate you taking the time to hear my story. Trust me, the most difficult parts are still coming, and I really need your perspective on whether I'm making the right choice. That night, after being denied the summer program opportunity, something inside me broke and then immediately hardened. I realized that no matter what I achieved, no matter how hard I tried, I would never be enough for my mother. So I stopped trying to please her and started working toward my escape. I took every EP class available, worked nights at a local diner to save money, and applied to universities as far from California as possible. When I got a full scholarship to Northwestern University in Chicago, I saw it as my ticket to freedom. My mother's reaction to my acceptance was predictably dismissive. She suggested I thought I was too good for California schools now. College was like stepping into sunlight after years in a dark room. Professors appreciated my work ethic, classmates valued my opinions, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. I threw myself into my studies with an intensity that worried my roommates. Pre-med requirements, volunteer work at local hospitals, research opportunities. I grabbed every chance to prove that I was worth something, even if my mother couldn't see it. During those 4 years, I went home exactly 3 times, 2 Christmases and 1 Easter. Each visit confirmed that nothing had changed. Marcus was still the golden child, now working construction and living at home with his girlfriend. Rebecca was in high school, getting the emotional support and encouragement I'd never received. And my mother still treated me like an unwelcome stranger who happened to share her DNA. Medical school at Johns Hopkins was even better. I was surrounded by brilliant, driven people who understood my ambition. I met Sarah there during our 2nd year. She was studying to be a pediatric oncologist, and she had the kindest eyes I'd ever seen. Sarah was the first person I told about my childhood. Really told. Not just vague mentions of family issues. I expected her to think I was exaggerating or being dramatic. Instead, she validated my experience, telling me she was sorry I'd gone through that, and that no child deserves to feel unwanted by their parent. For the first time, someone understood my pain instead of telling me to just forgive and forget or reminding me that she was still my mother. Sarah and I got married right after residency. We moved to Denver because I'd gotten an offer at Presbyterian or St. Joseph Hospital, one of the best cardiac surgery programs in the country. Sarah found a position at Children's Hospital Colorado, and we bought a small house in the suburbs. For the first time in my life, I felt truly happy. We had careers we loved, a home that felt safe, and plans for the future. We talked about kids, about traveling, about growing old together. My contact with my family dwindled to holiday cards and the occasional phone call. My mother never visited our new home, never showed interest in my career achievements, never asked about Sarah or our marriage. When I made chief resident, she didn't congratulate me. When I published my first research paper in the Journal of Thoracic Surgery, she didn't mention it. When Sarah and I announced we were trying to have children, she changed the subject. But Marcus and Rebecca still called occasionally, usually when they needed something. Money for Marcus's various get-rich-quick schemes, advice about Rebecca's college applications, mediation when they fought with our parents. I helped when I could, but I noticed that my assistance was always taken for granted while my absences were criticized endlessly. Rebecca once told me that I'd changed since moving away, that I used to be family-oriented. The irony was crushing. I'd never been treated as family when I lived there, but now that I'd found happiness elsewhere, I was accused of abandoning them. Sarah, who grew up in a loving family in Minnesota, struggled to understand the dynamics. She'd suggest that maybe my mother had changed, that perhaps having grandchildren would bring us closer. She believed people could grow and heal, that maybe Mom regretted how she'd treated me. I wanted to believe her, but every interaction with my mother proved otherwise. During our rare phone conversations, she still managed to find ways to diminish my achievements or compare me unfavorably to my siblings. When Sarah had her first miscarriage, I called my mother hoping for some maternal comfort or wisdom. Instead, she suggested that maybe it was for the best, since we both worked too much to be good parents anyway. That was the last time I initiated contact with her. After Marcus dropped the bombshell about Mom's Alzheimer's diagnosis, and I refused to become her caregiver, the family pressure campaign began in earnest. First came the daily phone calls from Marcus, alternating between guilt trips and anger. He reminded me constantly that she was our mother and questioned how I could be so cold. He emphasized that I was the only one with the medical knowledge to understand what she was going through, and that Dad's health wasn't good enough for him to be the primary caregiver. Rebecca had 3 kids and worked 2 jobs, which left me as the obvious choice. Then Rebecca joined in with her own brand of emotional manipulation. She told me that Mom asked about me, that even with the Alzheimer's, she remembered having a son who was a doctor. Rebecca claimed Mom was proud of me, even if she'd never known how to show it. That comment hit hard because I desperately wanted it to be true. But I'd learned not to trust my family's version of my mother's feelings about me. My father, who'd been largely silent throughout my childhood about my mother's treatment of me, finally called. He acknowledged that things weren't always easy between Mom and me, but reminded me that she was sick now, and this was different. I asked him how it was different, pointing out that she was the same person who'd told me I disappointed her just by existing, the same person who'd refused to support my education, the same person who couldn't be bothered to congratulate me when I became a surgeon. Why should her illness change how I felt about our relationship? His answer was simple: because she was my mother, and because it was the right thing to do. The right thing to do. I'd heard that phrase my entire life, usually when someone wanted me to accept unacceptable behavior from my mother. But the pressure wasn't just coming from my family. Word had somehow gotten out in our small hometown community, and suddenly, I was receiving messages from family friends, former teachers, and even people I barely remembered from high school. The message was always the same: I was being selfish, ungrateful, and cruel. How could a successful doctor abandon his sick mother in her time of need? What they didn't understand was that I wasn't abandoning her. You can't abandon someone who never wanted you in the first place. Against my better judgment and at Sarah's urging, I finally agreed to visit my mother 2 months after the diagnosis. Sarah thought that seeing Mom's condition firsthand might change my perspective, and part of me wondered if she was right. Maybe the disease had softened her edges. Maybe facing mortality had given her some perspective on our relationship. Maybe this was our chance to heal old wounds before it was too late. We flew to California on a Friday afternoon. I hadn't been back to Bakersfield in 4 years, and the familiar sight of the flat, agricultural landscape filled me with the same sense of claustrophobia I felt as a teenager. My parents still lived in the same house where I'd grown up. Walking through that front door was like stepping back in time, and not in a good way. The house looked exactly the same, down to the family photos lining the hallway, photos of Marcus's football achievements, Rebecca's graduation, family Christmas pictures where I always looked uncomfortable and out of place. Mom was sitting in her favorite chair in the living room, watching a game show. At first glance, she looked exactly the same, maybe a little thinner, a little more frail, but still the stern-faced woman who had dominated my childhood. When Dad gently told her I was there to visit, she looked up at me with confusion in her eyes, and for a moment my heart broke. This proud, difficult woman was disappearing piece by piece. But then her expression cleared, and she said something that shattered any hope I'd had for a deathbed reconciliation. She asked what I'd done wrong now. Not hello. Not that she'd missed me. Not that she was glad I was there. Her first instinct, even with Alzheimer's, was to assume I'd done something wrong. Marcus quickly intervened, reminding her that I'd come all the way from Denver to see her. She looked at me suspiciously, suggesting that I probably wanted something because I always wanted something. The next 2 days were a masterclass in why I distanced myself from this family in the first place. Despite her cognitive decline, my mother's personality remained largely intact, and that personality was still critical, still cold, still primarily focused on Marcus and Rebecca. When Rebecca's kids visited, Mom's face lit up with genuine joy. She remembered their names, asked about school, showered them with the kind of affection I'd never received as a child. But with me, even in her confused state, she remained distant and suspicious. On our last day in California, the family held what they called a planning meeting, but what felt more like an intervention. We sat around the same kitchen table where I'd been told I was a disappointment so many years ago. Marcus had prepared a whole presentation about Mom's care needs, complete with charts and schedules. He explained that she needed constant supervision within the next 6 months. The doctor had said she shouldn't be driving anymore, and she'd already had 2 incidents where she'd forgotten to turn off the stove. Rebecca added information about professional care options. They'd looked into facilities, but the good ones had waiting lists, and the costs were astronomical. Even with insurance, they were looking at $6,000 a month. Then came the pitch I'd been dreading. If I moved back home, I could oversee her medical care while Dad handled the day-to-day responsibilities. My job skills were transferable. Hospitals in Fresno and Bakersfield would love to have a surgeon of my caliber. Looking at my family, these people who had watched my mother treat me like a burden for 18 years, I felt something inside me snap. I asked them to clarify what they were requesting. They wanted me to uproot my entire life, leave the career I'd spent 15 years building, abandon the first healthy relationship I'd ever had, and move back to the place where I was miserable for 2 decades, all to care for someone who'd made it clear my entire childhood that she didn't want me around. Rebecca insisted that Mom was different now, that the disease had changed her. I challenged this assertion, pointing out that in the past 3 days, she'd criticized my appearance, questioned my motives for visiting, and told Sarah that I'd always been difficult. That sounded exactly like the mother I remembered. Marcus slammed his hand on the table, calling my response exactly the selfish attitude they were talking about. Everything was always about me, he said. But what about what was best for Mom? I asked when this family had ever considered what was best for me. The room fell silent until my father spoke up, delivering what felt like emotional blackmail. If I didn't help them, they'd have to put her in a state facility. He asked if I wanted my mother warehoused with strangers. I spent the flight back to Denver staring out the window, wrestling with a decision that felt impossible no matter which way I approached it. Sarah, ever the peacemaker, tried to help me see different perspectives. She acknowledged that my childhood was difficult, but reminded me that Mom was sick now. This might be my chance to be the bigger person, to break the cycle of hurt in my family. I asked her what about us? What about the life we'd built in Denver? What about her career, our plans to start a family. Should I sacrifice all of that for someone who'd never sacrificed anything for me? She admitted it wouldn't be easy, but suggested we could make it work. People relocate for family emergencies all the time. That night, I called my mentor from medical school, Dr. Harrison. He became something of a father figure to me over the years, and I trusted his judgment more than almost anyone's. After I explained the situation, he asked me a simple question: if my mother had been loving and supportive throughout my childhood, would I be having this conversation right now? I admitted I wouldn't be. I'd already be packing. He told me that gave me my answer. I didn't owe anyone a relationship just because we shared DNA. I'd worked too hard to build a healthy life to sacrifice it for people who'd never valued me. But the family pressure continued to intensify. Marcus started calling Sarah directly, trying to get her to convince me. Rebecca sent long emails detailing Mom's decline and begging me to reconsider. The final straw came when I received a message from my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, who I hadn't spoken to in years. She told me that she didn't usually get involved in family business, but couldn't stay silent about this situation. She accused me of abandoning my dying mother out of spite over childhood grievances, saying this wasn't the man she thought I was. Childhood grievances. As if 18 years of emotional abuse could be dismissed so casually. That's when I made my decision. I called Marcus and told him that I would not be moving back to California, would not be becoming Mom's primary caregiver, and would not be guilted into destroying my life for someone who had shown me nothing but contempt for 3 decades. Marcus told me I was dead to them and hung up. It's been 3 months since I made that decision, and the fallout has been exactly what I expected and somehow worse than I imagined. Half my family no longer speaks to me. Marcus blocked me on all social media and told other relatives that I chose money over family. Rebecca still texts occasionally, but the messages are filled with updates about Mom's decline and barely concealed accusations. My extended family has mostly taken sides against me. Cousins I rarely spoke to anyway have made their disapproval known through mutual friends and social media posts about family loyalty and doing the right thing. But here's what's strange. I also feel lighter than I have in years. For the first time in my adult life, I'm not walking on eggshells around my family's expectations. I'm not bracing myself for criticism every time my phone rings. I'm not carrying the weight of trying to earn love from someone who was never going to give it. Sarah and I have started trying to have children again. We've planned a vacation to Europe next summer, something we never could have done if we'd moved to California to care for my mother. My work has improved because I'm not constantly distracted by family drama. I was recently offered a promotion to department head, an opportunity that never would have existed if I'd left Denver. But the guilt is still there, lurking in quiet moments. Last week, Rebecca sent me a video of Mom trying to remember my name. Watching this once formidable woman struggle with basic memories was heartbreaking, regardless of our history. Am I making the right choice? I honestly don't know anymore. My therapist, yes. I finally started therapy to work through all of this, says that I'm not responsible for my mother's illness or for fixing the damage she caused in our relationship. She reminds me that choosing my own well-being isn't selfish. It's necessary. But late at night, when I can't sleep, I wonder, what if she dies while we're estranged? What if she has moments of clarity where she wonders why her son abandoned her? What if I'm really just as cold and selfish as my family says I am? The truth is, there's no perfect answer here. Either I sacrifice the life I've built to care for someone who never cared for me, or I live with the knowledge that I chose my own happiness over family obligation. So there it is, my story in all its messy, complicated reality. Am I the a-hole for refusing to care for my sick mother? Or am I finally putting my own well-being first after decades of emotional abuse? I genuinely want to know what you think. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-preservation? How do you balance forgiveness with protecting yourself from people who've hurt you? Please leave your honest thoughts in the comments below. I've been living with this decision for months now, and I'm still not sure if I'm doing the right thing. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to hear more real-life dilemmas like this one. Sometimes the most difficult questions in life don't have easy answers, and maybe that's okay. And if you want to hear another story that will make you question everything you think you know about family obligations, check out the video I'm recommending next. Am I the a-hole for not paying for my sister's wedding after what she did to my wife? Trust me, that one will leave you speechless. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself.